as per what I have set or what we've set as the training objectives. So without further ado, I just want to take you to my slide. So we are looking at diversity management, and basically our main focus will be to look at what makes this diversity or what constitutes diversity. But of more importance is our objectives today. We'll be looking at what is diversity, what's diversity management. Then at the organizational level, how do we attain diversity? So that as much as we understand what it is, then the onus is on us now to be able to effect this. How do we actualize organizational diversity? Then of course, closely related to comes to matters work. Then at the same time, as we conclude, we'll be looking at the different cultures and how these cultures tend to affect how we interact and how we deal with people. So we'll be looking at this diversity from first from the general perspective, what is our understanding of diversity? So that from that, then we narrow down to diversity at the organizational level. But I'm glad that by the end of the 3 modules, then we'll be very well anchored on how to manage diversity. And of course, also not just to look at diversity as a common concept, but also to look at it as something that can add value to the business. If we adhere to diversity, then what implication does that have on the management of people? And also what implication does it have to the strategic business? Because every business is always looking at how well can it navigate the challenge of the market. And you find that diversity will become a key pillar when it comes to how do you position yourself? Because ideally, as a business, we look at the business as an entity. Then how do the public view the organization? Do they view your organization as an organization that does not adhere to these differences? Just to allude to what it is. Do you consider differences? Do you value that? Do you give people those opportunities? And such like concepts that we may want to delve on. So as an introduction, there is this technology company or a multinational company called Helium. This Helium is an MNC and is well known for its policy of being an equal employment or equal opportunity employer. Then we have this lady called Hazel. So Hazel has applied for a position of a sales manager with this organization. And you see that from the onset, this organization had that policy. But we want to know whether this policy, is it just applying on paper or is it a policy that has been effective in the organization? Because you'll agree with me that even in where we work, we have so many brilliant policies. We have very, very well documented processes, but do we ever follow these processes? You find that we don't, in most cases, we don't follow the processes because of other reasons. It could be within the structure itself. It could be because of people unwillingness to follow that, or sometimes it's just an aspect of not considering these policies as important to the activities because we are used to the normal way of doing things, and therefore it doesn't augur to us that is a key thing that we need to consider. So under this, you find that Hazel appears for the interview, and she's informed that due to the stress and pressures associated with the job, the interviewers are not keen on hiring women for the role. When you see, remember we talked about equal opportunity employer as a policy which this MNC has. But to the surprise, she's being told that the work is so stressful, the work has a lot of pressure, and therefore women are not encouraged or not supposed to be hired. So then the question you ask yourself is, if this organization is an equal opportunity employer, how come it's flouting the same regulation, the same policy that it has by isolating this lady, saying that this position does not require a lady to apply for it. Yet she applied for that position, and there was no caveat to it, saying that women are not supposed to apply. So, and as you can see, this Helium has a policy on paper. And even by advertising, you know, and you've seen this, at the end of it, every organization will say ABC is an equal opportunity employer. Everyone is encouraged to apply. But then you can see that in this one, they're saying that having advertised for the position from everyone, the advertisement, they actually targeted everyone, but they have not, did not show any intent of not hiring women for that particular position. So what does that portend for this organization? And ideally, what does it portend for you as a professional seated where you are looking at this concept? One, if you look at this, then you can see that this is just a replica of many organizations that we work in. It's not an isolated case, actually, because whatever we're having here, it could be similar to even what organizations do, where they advertise for the position, but they already have somebody who is going to get, or somebody in mind. It's like you're advertising for a position, but you're already creating a position for someone else. So you already know the person that you want to get this position, and therefore you're only doing it for formality purposes, which actually is unethical, and it goes against the integrity and professionalism of the profession. So in other words, we are looking at an organization that typifies the organizations today, or typifies where we work today. Because at one instance, I know if you ask each one of you, you'll be able to share with us some of these challenges where you applied for a job and even you never received any, even if it's a regret, no regret, you never knew whether the position or whether your application was received, and therefore there's completely no information, you're kept in the dark. So that's similarly to this concept whereby we advertise, but we don't put into consideration that we need to do our obligation as a people or as professionals. How do we go about communicating the right information, and how do we not do we go about not wasting people's opportunities, or we create a high, we call it, you're creating that energy and people are really excited to apply for the position. Yet at the back of your mind, you've already tailor-made it for somebody else. So there's a question that we need to ask ourselves. Are we the Helium company, a typical company where we are, or are we different? Do we practice our policy as it is? So the question is, then do you think Hazel was treated fairly? From that perspective, do you think this Hazel was treated fairly? Then Helium, of course, now you can see that Helium does not support that concept of being an equal opportunity employer, and hence it talks about encouraging diversity. So you can see it's like double speak. So on one side, you're talking about equal opportunity, but on the other side, you're actually not dealing with, or you're not actually conforming to the policy that you've already said. So then this then draws us into the question that we have a policy, but what is happening is different from the policy. And at times I usually I usually bring in the concept of the reality versus the perception. So you're creating a perception of equal opportunity employer, but the reality is we do not even move closer to that. That's the kind of question that we need to think about as we engage in this conversation. So you can see Hazel is a very qualified person. And how many people of Hazel's group have lost these opportunities because just organizations have not been able to practice this equal opportunity employer? There's so many of them. We can have so many cases. And in fact, when you talk to people, they'll tell you how they lost a particular job, or you applied for a position and you knew very well this one I cannot get. I don't stand a chance, because from the onset, I don't see objectivity. I don't see justice, I don't see fairness in the whole process. And that's what is very, very demeaning when it comes to providing these opportunities to the people. So in our today's discussion, then, we need to look at how this diversity plays an important role in our today's organizations. Then how do we manage diversity so that it informs our decision making? We need to look at people being at the center of success of the organization. We need to look at it as being part and parcel of the drive of the business. But in the event that we discard that aspect, where now we don't look at the potential in people, we don't look at the competencies in these people, that's where now we start taking a direction that is not very value add to the organization. So we can agree that actually Hazel was not treated fairly, because we should not treat people on the basis of gender. We shouldn't treat them because of a particular disability. We shouldn't discriminate them because of where they come from. We shouldn't discriminate them because of their religion. And that's what some of the things that are coming out of this. So, bearing in mind that this company, the Helium Inclusive, actually supports diversity, but only in theory, then we need to ask ourselves that how many of these companies, how many of these organizations exist today? You'll find that there are so many. In fact, when you look at some reports from that have been done, there's a report that was done by the Transparency International, just looking at the multinationals and how they have been able to actually uphold this diversity. And they mentioned that a number of them, I think that study was done in 2017, they mentioned a number of these multinationals that as much as they have created that impression that they are global with regards to managing diversity, but now when it comes to motivation, because this is another aspect whereby if we talk about diversity, we should not just stop at recruitment, but also let us look at training opportunities. Let's look at how we do the incentives. How are the incentives done to ensure that we do not create a rift in the people? So that study revealed that there are so many underlying issues that actually people face in those organizations. There are those that have actually allowed people to get opportunities, but down when now you look at the aspect of growth, when you look at the issues to do with handling people issues, you find that discrimination still persists. And that was a study that was supported by so many executives who say that actually that's their position because of also the various, or also the, what do you call it, the culture, the origin of that organization. Because when we'll be looking at the different cultures, you find that organizations that have an origin, for example, in Asia, the manner in which they handle diversity matters will be very different from those that have the origin in US, for example, or those that have origin in UK, or those that have origin in Southern Africa. So all that is what now informs our debate on whether diversity is a concept that has to be enhanced, and also whether we need to ensure that equal opportunity and diversity go hand in hand, so that we don't preach equal opportunity, but we are not even giving these people the chance. We are not valuing them. Because it will be adversarial for you to recruit me in this organization, then you don't give me that opportunity to exercise my capability. Or you actually hire me, but you don't give me that trajectory in terms of career growth. Because ultimately then that will destroy my career plan, or that will destroy my career development. Because I've joined an organization, then I look at myself and say, I don't see the future in this organization. Why? Because I'm not seeing diversity management policy that is being implemented, whereby you find people are not getting that the right opportunity to exercise themselves. So what is diversity? So many people have, or they'll give you this concept, but in a general perspective, we can say that people talk about the mix of gender, others talk about race, sexual orientation, ethnicity, religion, all that in a setting whereby there is no discrimination based on these traits. So ideally, we look at diversity in view of these traits, where we say, if I'm not discriminated, like now, if you look at the case of Hazel, she has been discriminated based on gender. We have other cases whereby you are discriminated based on what? On your race, on your ethnic community or ethnicity, or your sexual orientation, where somebody will say that you don't deserve to be in this position, you don't deserve to be a CEO, you don't deserve to be in this kind of setting. So all these become challenges that are diversity, or as we look at handling diversity, then we need to be alive to them. And also just look at ways of providing the right environment to make sure that as much as we expect people to perform, but we need to look at these other issues that could be demotivating to them. So not just talk about recruiting someone, but also look at it that, am I creating an environment that will support this person? Am I giving this person the right attitude, the mindset in him or her? Because lack of that mindset, then it is just degrading the aspect of the role that you expect the person to perform. And ultimately, you will find that you are not getting the performance expectations. And at times now, we are not able to link that because we lack that clarity in terms of what other factors tend to influence the performance of the people. And ultimately, the performance of the people has an implication on the performance of the organization. So how does that relate to the organization? So in the recent past, or recently, you find that organizations in different sectors have been working towards having this diverse workforce, where you'll say that, okay, we celebrate, I've seen companies celebrating that in an organization, we have people from Asia, we have people from neighboring Tanzania, we have people from Uganda, we have people from West Africa, we have people from Latino countries. So all that's what you've seen organizations trying to put out, that image that we are a multi-racial organization, that we are an organization that has different people drawn from different parts of the globe. So already with that message, they're sending to the world that they actually enhance diversity. And meaning that before them now looking at that diversity, then they have embraced what? Equal employment opportunity. Now, the challenge also comes in when you're looking at your policies and you ask yourself, do our policies, are they clear-cut when it comes to effecting this concept of equal opportunity? Or do they have gaps? And if they have these gaps, then how do we ensure that these gaps are minimized to create an environment that is objective? Because now you can have people that are, okay, you may have applicants, for example. So you have applicants who are interested in the corporation because of the image that has been created. But wait until now these people join the organization, then they get dissatisfied because they will say, whatever this company preaches is not what actually happens. And normally we talk about this employer of choice or the employer branding. Or every organization actually today wants to brand themselves as the best employer. They want to appear like they're the best employer on the market. They're the best in terms of giving people value, in terms of providing with them the opportunities, the right environment, and all that. So that has an implication on what the organization should actually be pursuing. And that's why when you talk about diversity in employment, then we are looking at, is the organization bringing on potential recruits on the basis of what? Of non-discrimination on gender, ethnicity, and other physical constraints. Therefore, does this organization adopt a policy that is in black and white, provides that kind of setting for the people? Or is it an organization that behaves like the helium inclusive? So those are the kind of questions that as we look at this, we need to understand. So I hope I'm not moving very fast, But then we need to look at the definition of diversity, because whatever we are looking at, we're just trying to understand the journey towards diversity, and what sometimes we feel we are practicing diversity, but yet we are not practicing that diversity. So this definition by Esty says that diversity is acknowledging, understanding, accepting, valuing, and celebrating differences among people with respect to age, class, ethnicity, gender, physical, mental ability, we have race, sexual orientation, spiritual practice, and public assistance status. So if you look at all this, we are just looking at acknowledging. In fact, the key words: acknowledge, you understand, you accept, you value, and celebrate. What does acknowledging mean? Acknowledging means you may look at Wilfred and say, or Patrick and say, I know Patrick has this potential. I know Patrick has this limitation, and therefore I need to know how well can I get the best out of Patrick, or how well can I get the best out of Wilfred? Okay? Because ideally, for you to manage diversity, you must recognize that we are different. There's no way we'll be the same. There's no way we'll have the same attitude, the same skills. There's always that uniqueness in a person. So your ability to understand that and acknowledging that this person is different, and therefore I should not look at the shortcoming of the person, but let me look at how well can I get the best out of this person, is what will inform our diversity management. So then we accept, okay? Then we value. And maybe these I can just relate it to the normal life, where people talk about that if you are to enter a relationship, then you need to accept and understand the person. Don't get in with that concept of changing everyone or changing this person to fit in your mindset. They cannot do that. But by acknowledging that they have this 1, 2, 3 weakness and they have this 1, 2, 3 capability, then that way, then you are able now to devise ways of developing more on this strength and also trying to minimize the weaknesses. So more importantly, when you look at diversity, is valuing. How do we value people? So we value people by appreciating that they add value to the organization. And therefore, we're also giving them incentives, we are supporting them. If it's about their working environment, we are giving them the environment that is supportive. If you are supervising them, also you are giving them the right support for them to work. Then also we have this aspect of celebrating differences. How do we celebrate differences among the people? How do we celebrate these differences? Because ideally you'll be asking yourself, is it about having, or when we have Christmas, when you give people vouchers, when you give them, or you have end of the year party, or when you give them being a holiday, then are people allowed to go on holiday? Then what do you do as part of celebration? For the times, I think we've come to a point whereby we no longer value these differences. There are some organizations where I've had people saying that they're not even allowed to go and celebrate. For example, they had a day off. Okay, they're supposed to go for a day off. Maybe let's say Muslims have their Eid, others have, I think the Indians have what? They have their celebration, I think in November, Diwali. I think they have Diwali. Then Christians have this, we have Christmas, we have Easter. Then we have other people now when it comes to, apart from that, those public holidays, assuming people want to go for a retreat, are they given that opportunity to go for the retreat? Because now we need to move away from the global recognition of differences to now the whatever happens at the organization. Or when somebody has to go and attend to some spiritual I've mentioned, or maybe somebody needs assistance in public and you can see that they need, or they are disabled. So how do we assist them in terms of that? What role have we played? When you look at, for example, class and age, currently we are saying that organizations have 4 types of ages, or we call them as the generations. We have generation Z, we have Y, we have baby boomers, we have generation, what do you call them, veterans, we have then the traditionalist. So all those generations are at the workplace today. So how do we achieve that aspect of valuing? How do we value each one of them so that at the end of it, we don't appear to be or maybe we don't end up to appear like we are actually inclining towards one generation at the expense of the other. So are we able now to get harmonization of this when it comes to valuing this class of people? When it comes to age, we have many young people, the Generation Z, joining organizations today. How do we acknowledge them vis-a-vis people who are in Generation X, who are now very senior in the organization? So how do we look at that balance between the young person who has just joined the organization, their needs vis-a-vis the person who has been there and they have gone through the process, and it's like the organization is more of the DNA in their blood. So that's what this concept is all about. So when it comes to dimensions, now to go deeper into this, then I want you to look at this diagram where it tends to now to give a general view of diversity, so that we don't just look at the main ones of race, gender, and all that, but I want us now to go deeper and look at things to do with how do you, for example, acknowledge somebody who is senior to you? How do you also deal with people who are in unions? How do you also look at the categorization with regard to the department? Because more often than not, you've heard people saying that our department is not given the right support, or our department is discriminated, or we are discriminated because we don't appear to be, or our organization has been put on the periphery. Our department is at the periphery. Our role is at the periphery. Or I'm discriminated because of my education or my income. Okay, now that comes to the status. Or sometimes it's about the life experience or the work experience. So somebody will listen to you and they will tell other people that, oh, so and so has this problem, you know, he just lost, or he just currently people are just talking about the instability, maybe in families, and they're saying that they don't speak with the brother or they don't speak with the sister, just because maybe you shared with them that experience. So does that become an indicator of discrimination? Do people now start looking at you as a very different person? Do you, as HR professionals, use these life experiences? I've had a case where, and maybe I stand to be corrected when it comes to some of us who are HR professionals, that people nowadays, they fear confiding to us some of their personal life experiences because they will hear it through, actually the information is likely to be in the public domain. So how do we ensure that confidentiality? Because I've had it in so many organizations, and people always complain that as much as we need to confide our issues to our HR, but our HR does not keep calm. She doesn't keep calm at all. So then you ask yourself, if the HR does not keep calm, then is he or she just a replica of the normal human beings? Then where does the professionalism go? Where has this person left that aspect of belief? Because people believe in you. That's why they will come and confine in you what the challenges are. Or when somebody even tells you about their problem with the family or the religion or the personal habits, then how do you handle that information with utmost confidentiality? So all these are things that they look minute, but you find that they have a very spiraling effect on the way in which we deal with people and the manner in which we interact. Even the work style. Remember, I may not be doing the work the same way you want me to do, but ultimately I'm able to meet my objectives, I'm able to meet the targets. Then will there be a problem when I do the work in my own style, or you're that person who will say that I want you to do it this way, I want this date to be on the left-hand side, not the right-hand side. I want this paragraph to be in this manner. So as much as we are looking at that aspect of control, but are we able to give people the opportunity to exercise that autonomy? Because by giving me that autonomy, that's when actually you can realize what potential I have. But if we keep on bulldozing the activities, or we keep on making people feel that they have to follow our direction, they have to follow our line of thought, then that's where now we destroy the diversity. So instead of managing diversity, then we tend now to actually negate the diversity concept. Because at the end of it, if I have a work experience which is not being utilized, which I'm not able to share with other people, then what does that mean? Nobody will benefit from it. So I'll keep that information, I'll be with it, it will become obsolete and nobody will have gained from it, just because I was not given a chance to share that information. Now, sharing information does not mean that you make me a line manager. Neither does it mean that you promote me to a position, but more of identifying that James can do this. What if we have James to facilitate the new team that is coming up when it comes to positioning our market? James has brilliant ideas, so therefore can we have James in this task force? So I may not basically belong to that department, but since you've realized that I have this potential, then you put me where I will shine. So that's the essence of also now having to acknowledge these dimensions, because now it gives the person the ability to showcase what they have. It gives them that impetus now to showcase what they have. So when it comes to these other aspects of income, management status, all that, they border around also the issues of diversity, but at that level of status. Because we can discriminate you saying that you're not of my class. Remember, there's a time that concept was very common. People saying that you're not of my type, you're not of my class. That means they have already segregated you. They don't want to associate with you because to them, you have no value. To them, you don't have anything to offer. And that's a concept that we've also made it to appear normal when we say, show me your friends, and I tell who you are. So in the event of choosing our friends or the friendship that we create, at times, we also create these cocoons whereby we tend to isolate other people from the category of where we are. But if we are doing it for the benefit of the team members, but we don't also appear to be discriminating others, then that's well and good. But if we use it now to make other people feel less, then that's where the problem comes in, because we are not charting the way forward now to develop other people, but rather it's like you're using it as a weapon to hit back at other people and saying, I don't conform to their ideas, I don't like them, I don't like this person's views, or his views or her views are always off the discussion. Maybe ask yourself, when we hold meetings, if you ask yourself the meetings that you've held in the organization, maybe for the period, let's just say this year alone, have you had contribution of everyone in that department? How often have you had that contribution? It may be not to be verbal, but sometimes it may not be audio at that moment, but this person has at one point been allowed to give their opinion. So ask yourself that. If you find that you've not given people that opportunity, and maybe there are only 5 people who speak in that meeting, then you're already a culprit of this. You're this person that does not acknowledge diversity. Or if you look at the organization, now we are talking about gender issues. Even in public, in politics, we are looking at the gender rule. So the gender rule, when you talk about a third of either gender. Right now, you've seen at the political circle, there's a lot of clamor to ensure that we have this gender rule entrenched in the Constitution or in the new amendments. But now the question is the government committed to it? Because remember, it's already in the Constitution. Now they're talking about amending it. So how will that bring about realization of the implementation? Because that are now the tough question that we ought to ask ourselves. So ladies and gentlemen, ideally, when we look at all these, then it is a pointer towards how we can manage the diversity. Look at this and just think, have you been able to embrace this? If you've not been able to embrace it, then that means you have a lot of work to do to ensure that diversity is upheld. So then diversity management is definitely planning, implementing the systems of the organization and practices to manage people so that the potential advantages of diversity are maximized, while the potential disadvantages are minimized. That's a very strong point. Planning and implementing organizational systems and practices that will manage people so that the potential advantages of diversity are maximized. So looking at this maximization then, it definitely borders on realizing that we have this, let's give an example. We have this techno-savvy person. This techno-savvy person was employed in business development, but you find that they have a lot of passion for technology. Then how do we have a clear plan to ensure that we maximize on this person? We can always have this person support the IT team. We can have this person only support the rest of the members. So that's an aspect of implementing systems and practices to manage people so that their potentials are adhered to, or we are able now to get the potential advantages and minimize the disadvantages. So that's the definition of diversity management. So that we look at the synergy. We look at having 10 people giving us the value that we want. Because at times we lose out on these people because we assume that they must belong to this thinking. They must do things this way. But so if we lose that aspect of not acknowledging that they're different and they can do things differently and make us to achieve more, that's where we don't then achieve this diversity. So then, my question that I want us to look at is, why is it important to manage diversity? Why is it important? Do you see any importance of managing diversity at your own organization? And maybe this one will allow us to have a discussion, or just on the chat section, just indicate, do you think managing diversity is important? Why? Why do you think it's important to manage diversity? And if we don't manage diversity, what could be the consequence? Or is it that even if we manage or we don't manage, it doesn't affect us? Or in our organization, first of all, we have never thought of diversity, but we go on like that. So let us just engage a little bit. I just expect you to share your thoughts. Share your thoughts. And even you can share the questions on Q&A, just relating to this diversity. So that as we are looking at these challenging times, then how well are we prepared to ensure that we acknowledge it? And what is the importance of this diversity management? Is it something that you'll advocate for? Is it something that you'll want other organizations to uphold? Hello? What? Hello, guys. Hello.
Hi. Yes. Yeah,
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Sorry.
Yeah, now we can.
Technology
Now we can
issues.
hear.
Oh, you can hear?
Yes, we can now. You are back.
Sorry, I just
Yes,
closed.
we can.
I just had a power outage and it has affected the transmission. But now it is it's stable. Sorry about that. I don't know whether by the time I was asking questions on the importance of diversity management, is it the time? Is that the time I went off, or it was even before that?
No, when you told us to write our comments.
Oh yes, that's the time it went off, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Fine. So I think then can we share those comments just in the next 5 minutes on the chat? Chat section on the open. I think I'm not able to see the chat. I can only see the Q&A. Okay, I can see the chat. Fine. So what do you think is the importance of diversity management? Or if we manage diversity, then what do we purpose to achieve? What do you think we purpose to achieve with managing diversity? As opposed to if we don't manage diversity, what is it that we may say we lost out if we didn't manage diversity, compared to if we manage diversity? I think that's the question I had asked, so that we just share our thoughts along that line. And maybe to make it a bit clearer, look at where you are and ask yourself, does your organization acknowledge or manage diversity? Because now from that, we'll be well put now to explain to us, what is it that you feel will have been done better on that front? What is it that can be done better on that front, so that you make that organization a dream for every other potential employee? Any thoughts? Those who can speak, you can just unmute yourself and say. Those who can chat, you can share through the chat for 5 minutes, in the next 5 minutes. Hello. Are guys there, or I'm speaking to myself? Are we there? Are we there? Hello.
Hello.
Yes. How are you?
Okay, fine. I'm fine, thank you.
Yes. What's your take on that?
I think my observation is that when an organization practices diversity,
yes,
and I had made that comment that it enhances its reputation. My experience has been there are organizations where people feel that a particular maybe ethnic group or a particular religion is not wanted, and you find that they shy away from applying for jobs there. And then you also notice that every now and then you see comments. This can even be in the media, that this is an organization for these and these types of people. And generally, it really affects the image and the reputation of the company or the organization very, very, very negatively. I have a feeling that may even impact on the acceptance of its products, or its clientele may also get this feeling that this is not the kind of organization that we really need to support or we really need to work with. So I have a feeling that if not handled carefully, it can work to the detriment of the organization.
Very true. Very well said. Well said. Actually, it can damage the image of the organization and ultimately the acceptance of that organization actually within the premise of the public. So it can have that damage on that. Then I've seen Martha saying level of innovation is achieved if we value or if we implement diversity. Then again, keep those comments coming. Anybody else with another opinion on that? What is the significance of managing diversity? Just to take on what he said about the issues of the acceptance and the image. Have you ever even had situations where you ask your friend or you understand that your friend works for another organization, and when they tell you that they work for that company, what comes in your mind is, hey, and how do you manage? How do you survive? Because already they have that perception that that organization does not give people the right environment, or it's an organization that subverts people's rights. People's rights are not observed. You're not given, or your rights, maybe a right to go and leave. There's no right to go and leave. Even if you work long hours, nobody cares about it. So all those are some of the things that even people will be asking themselves, how do you manage? How do you survive? Because of the mindset or because of the perception that we have. And it all boils down to issues to do with this managing of diversity. I can see there is, it makes the company to have a competitive advantage through utilization of diverse skills, knowledge, and expertise. Thank you, Agesa. That is CHRP, Agesa Mugesani. Thank you. It makes the company to have competitive advantage through utilization of diverse skills, knowledge, and expertise. And actually, this is a question I posed to many people. I asked HRs, would you be comfortable working with people with diverse minds and skills, or you'd be comfortable working with people with a narrow mind so that they actually do what you say? Which one do you think you'll go for? And so at times you get a lot of views in terms of others saying that they'll be comfortable with people who conform and they get guided. Others would say, for me, I'll welcome the diversity because from the divergent views, I'm able to learn that what I thought or my line of thought is not exactly what can make it better. So by acknowledging the diversity, then it makes you also to have an open mind, and it actually makes your work easier. If you have these people with divergent minds and they're all over and they can do the work, you'll find that you spend less time supervising and instructing and or doing all the manner of those routine work, which sometimes people or professionals tend to lose out on that because they have not acknowledged that having these divergent views is actually better than having people who have minds that are a bit closed to that effect. So thank you, Dr. for that. Thank you, Martha, for that input. Good. So as you can see, we are saying that we're actually in a challenging times. Right now, we're talking about COVID-19. Now, how do you manage COVID-19 at the workplace? But that's a debate of another day. But as we look at that, then we also need to acknowledge that people will be living in different environments. So somebody could be living in an environment where there is no internet, but here you want them to connect. How do you ensure that that person has the right resources for them to work from home? I've seen companies that have provided people with internet since the start of COVID. Others have ensured that they have provided them with the right, the working environment, the seats. People have carried their seats, the office seats to their houses. So, and all that is in the effort of making the right environment for the people. Because now you don't expect somebody who is in a bedsitter that does not have even a chair to be able to work from home? How will you be able to have that conversation about them working from home when they don't have the gadgets? So it's all that is about now. How do we have the right organizational systems? Have you, in the recent past, had to amend some of the policies to ensure that you acknowledge that things have changed? COVID has brought changes now in the manner in which even we engage with people. People are carrying out team building online. People are holding sessions online, and they're actually making it fun. How do we do that to ensure that we're also able to have people on board, people with the right mind, and also having the right line of thought for the business? So when organizations have these different people drawn from race, age, and all that, then it actually makes it to appear as an organization that values the differences. And therefore, it will avoid these cases of discrimination where today I'll go to court and sue the company because it discriminated against me. I was not given the right, or the company don't follow the right or the due process when handling my disciplinary issues, or there was a lot of discrimination, I was not paid. All those issues will actually be a thing of the past if we uphold this diversity. However, one of the issues that affect diversity is when we have a situation where there's predominance in terms of particular races or ethnicity within an organization. So how do we deal with that? Because if you have the majority and minority, then how do you get a balance so that the minority also do not feel that you, the majority, are actually bulldozing them into making certain decisions, or the majority are actually making policies that favor them at the expense of the minority. So in that aspect, then it becomes a very pressing issue, especially with the treatment of people from different races, gender, and other age, and the rest. So then what does the organization has to do? We need now to have a very sober debate on how we enhance this awareness among the minority groups about their rights, so that even if I have 3 staff from the minority, what matters is, am I able to uphold or to respect their rights? Do I allow them to participate in decision making? Do I give them the right environment? Do I always listen to their views? Do we here to listen to their divergent views, so that we don't appear like we're making decisions because we're the majority and therefore the minority have no say? So we need to look at that and also listen, because as in leadership, we say that the kind of respect that you expect from that minority is also the same respect that they expect from you. So if I want respect from them, if I want cooperation from them, then I have also to respect them, and I also have to cooperate with them. So it has to be a mutual kind of relationship between me as the executor and also the person that I want this execution to take place. And that's what is informing this kind of statement, that we need to ensure that we enforce those rights as much as they are minority, but let them feel that the regulations or the policies that we have put in place are actually giving them that kind of value, that kind of feeling, that kind of belongingness to the organization. So then, as management, your role is to ensure that you sensitize your people towards adherence to these diversity issues. Let people understand why it is important. Let them see that every person of that organization contributes to the success of it. Let us look at that organization as a chain. So this chain, at every link, let's assume that's a person. And it doesn't matter who that person is. It could be a lady, it could be a disabled person, it could be a young person, it could be a middle-aged person, it could be another. All that is what now we look at it as a chain. So if you look at that chain, then the weakest link is always that chain. So at the moment you discriminate against one of these people, then just regard your chain as having a weakness. Because by discriminating against that person, then you are making your chain to be loose, or it becomes weak. And if the chain becomes weak, automatically it cannot pull the kind of force that you want it to pull, because already it becomes disjointed. So that's the essence of what we need to ensure that we appreciate. Let people understand that let's add value. Let us acknowledge the differences to be part of our benefits. Let me not look at you from the negative aspect. Let me look at you from the positive side. Let me look at you as a person I can work with to gain more from your technical skill. But let me not look at you as that person who always speaks mother tongue. Let me not look at you at that person who does not cooperate. But let me look at what is the best can we get from you. Because I've already mentioned, we will never have homogeneous people. At no point can we have a homogeneous type of people. Our differences should actually be used to achieve the best as an entity. Then apart from now the benefits, then we have these limitations. Now this dwells down to if you have a very hierarchical or your chain of decision making has to go through all these processes. Remember we talked about diversity in terms of the age, it talks about in terms of seniority status, management level and all that. So if we have a very typical hierarchical organization that has to go through all those processes, then the downfall will be that it slows down the decision-making process, whereby you have to say, can we consult? And at times, I tell people, we need to define this aspect of consultation. What does consultation mean? Does consultation mean getting a nod from you? Or consultation means having a discussion with you and making you understand why I'm doing something? Because if we tend to look at only having that nod or having that agreement, at no point can we agree on everything. But I think what is important is, are you able to make me understand your line of thought? And am I able to make you understand my line of thought? So that at the end of it, as much as my line of thought may not have been considered at that point, but I understand why you are taking this particular direction. That's the essence of this aspect. But failure to do that, then it makes people to feel that they are not being valued. So these different perspectives can also make it harder to achieve a compromise and consensus. So it's very vital. It's actually imperative that we understand. When we talk about sensitization, then make people understand the reason behind doing something. There's a quote that says that we don't get burned out because of what we do. We don't get a burnout because of what we do, but we get burnout because of not understanding why we do things. So the same concept here. I will actually differ with you and I will not even cooperate with you because I've not understood why we need to move to the online signatures, or why we need to change our policy on reporting. But once I understand why, then I'm now able to actually work together as a team with you. But failure to do that, then I will always feel that I'm not being valued. I'll feel that I'm just being wasted in this organization. Then another point is that diversity may necessitate different trainings, especially on sensitivity, which can be an additional cost to employers. But then the question here, you need to ask yourself here, because this one, in my view, it's more of a theoretical point of view, because supposing you don't train these people and they stick around, of what value will it give to you if you are having all these squabbles, people are not cooperating, people are just getting into groupthink and they're not working with the other because they look at the others as not the best team to work with, as compared to if you train these people to acknowledge this diversity and being sensitive to other people. Which one will be better? So, of course, training these people and making them to acknowledge that the sensitivity of other people, hence being able to deal with them in that level, will be more beneficial than if we look at it as an additional cost, which I think is a mindset that we need to change within the employers. So if you are here and you are the employer, please note that you need to train people, sensitize them on this, because it will save you a lot of costs. Unlike if you say that you don't want to train because it will be an additional cost. In fact, just look at the cost incurred of training people to understand themselves. Maybe when you look at the emotional intelligence, what would, if you train me to understand my weaknesses, my social makeup vis-a-vis the people that I'm dealing with, and how we can better synergize ourselves, which one will be more valuable? So you find that actually making people to understand themselves, each other, through emotional intelligence will be more valuable than if you disregard that and say, of course, I don't want to incur any cost. Let people find their way out. But that will be detrimental to your organization. Then, ladies and gentlemen, then this brings us to what is organizational diversity. What is organizational diversity? So from a number of definitions, we have this, of course, we've been talking about the traits. So we are looking at providing equal opportunity to the people at the organizational level without bias. So that our main role or our main purpose will be to have a mix of people. Because in most cases, people will say we want to inject new blood, we want to bring in people with new skills. We want people to come up with a new culture. We want people to bring us their line of thought from where they came from. So that can only be attained if we have what we call organizational diversity. Because as we do that, then we bring about these classes. We create the classes from the different proclivities, so that the aura of connectedness can be achieved at that level as the people. People connect very easily. You've seen people joining organizations and they hit the ground and everyone is excited about them. What do? There is that connectiveness because of the diversity. That's the time you realize, oh, so we can have people thinking of this in this perspective. So we can have this happening. So we can always do things differently. That way, then you're exciting people. You're evoking minds of connectedness. And they want to associate that because everyone is looking at growing. Everyone is looking at success. Everyone is looking at making it at workplace and also making it in life. So that diversity creates that environment where people can rethink themselves, they can redefine themselves, they can re-image themselves and say, I think I've gotten a role model. I think I can do this. I think I can do something more than what I can be able to do. However, as we purpose to achieve this diversity, but there will be challenges that will arise out of people or unions or some people that do not conform to these new ideas. Because to them, they look at it as you are trying to bring in people, but at the end of it, it will destroy our culture, which is not necessarily true. So then what is ideal versus the real when it comes to this diversity? As many people have always thought that organizations that we are in today, they more appear diverse in theory than in practice. Because if you sample today, you'll see there was a report from that was giving out in the public service. They were saying they'd listed the corporations and they were looking at how the distribution has been. And you could see that actually organizational diversity exists only in theory, but not in practice because of the experiences that we are seeing. So that means that we have systems that tend to negate diversity, or we have the political badwill. When people talk about goodwill, but you can see a political badwill where it actually focuses on rewarding people that have supported you at the expense of engaging into this diversity. So if people only commit themselves to employing people across the genders or across these traits, then that's the only way we can say our organization has been able to become real. It's now the reality that we have diversity. Otherwise, it will still become a pipe dream. It's more of a dream. Every time we say diversity, diversity, diversity. But when will we achieve this diversity? So it becomes a question to ponder about. Now, similarly, on that point of view, then you find that we are not able to achieve this diversity because of our mindset. You know, you'd be told that this is how we've been, this is how the organization has been. From the origin, from the founders, this is the culture. And therefore, this culture does not allow us to hire people from this race, or it doesn't allow us to hire people from this religion. There's another person, a friend of mine, who was giving me her experience about when she joined employment. That time she got employed, and she was told that make sure that in the first 3 years you don't get pregnant. Because if you get pregnant, then you automatically lose your job. So she told me it was a very painful moment because that's the time she also wanted to get married. But she got a job, and therefore the job limited her from enhancing what? Or achieving her family life objectives. Now she could not do that because here now the work environment she has been told, you do that, you'll go home and you'll not come back. So it becomes a hindrance now to this person's work-life balance. But that means you have now to focus more on the job at the expense of your other family needs, which now becomes also a challenge to organizational diversity. So you can see, as much as they were acknowledging that now in that organization, now we can say she was employed, she was a lady, yes. So in that case, the organization will say that, oh, for us, we employ people from different gender. We have ladies, we have men, we have people of different ages. But you can see there's already that problem where we talk about now the ideal versus the real. So you brought on board this lady, but already you've curtailed some of her rights, where you're saying pregnancy is not allowed, at least for the next 3 years. So in other words, you're already going against the rights of this person. But thank God, I think with employment laws, well, that was then, I think that's the time when the Employment Act, it was being in the process of being attained, because that person told me that the time she got a job, I think it was in early 90s. So she was just giving her that experience, that by the time she joined employment, there were some things that will not be acknowledged today. That was just looking at diversity, real versus the ideal. So on the same line, then we can say that diversity is about employees from different organizations being treated equally. Then we bring in the issue of inclusivity. Inclusivity. So that we don't bring people from different backgrounds, then we treat them shabbily because their co-workers have different views about diversity than management. So then how do we achieve diversity? I've already mentioned about sensitization. But of significance is, to what extent do we adhere to the policies? Now that we've said we may have a policy, very nicely written policies, very well articulated, but do we have that adherence to that code? Who is the enforcer? Who actually ensures that anybody who flouts those regulations is punished? And what is the extent of punishment? What is the extent of the punitive measures that the organization takes? So those are the issues that we need to ask ourselves, whether we're actually working towards conforming to that. Then we also need to make the people that are in these organizations to feel comfortable. And people can only feel comfortable if they have laws that protect them. Right now, as you can see, we can say that Kenya is on the right path, especially with regard to employment issues, compared to maybe the last 10 years. Because at least there has been that enforcement when it comes to adherence to some of the policies. Though you may single out some few organizations which do not do that, but majority, I think they have taken that step in adhering to some of these regulations, and employees too have been able to also understand what does the labor laws portend for them. What is it that they can get from that? Though there's still some, if you look at studies, they reveal that not many employees understand their rights when it comes to the labor laws. And that's why you find people getting into contracts without any documentation. So already without a documentation, then that employer can treat you unfairly, but you have no basis to say I was supposed to be paid. Because now there'll be no documentation to show that I actually gave you a contract and I'm supposed to pay you this amount of money, maybe weekly, daily, or at the end of the month. But I think we need to still make a lot of sensitization to the people and also to the employers, so that employers that do not conform to these regulations, then also they need to be told what impact does that have to them. Then once employees feel that comfort, then they'll be able to work very, very effectively. Okay, see, there's a chart. There's a chart from, okay, diversity management. Have a workforce composed of different ethnicities. Yeah, why diversity is important to organizations. So generally, I can say that having different ethnicities, it is actually a way in which an organization can brand itself, as we've said, and it's actually going to create an image that it's an organization that we need to look up to. It's an organization that is a brand. It's an organization that does not go against the rights of the people, and therefore it will make the business now to actually develop a competitive advantage, because you've seen companies that have done that. They've already been shouting about it. They'll always tell us how they've been able to to meet the needs of the different groups. They'll come out and also celebrate different communities. They'll celebrate different races. They'll celebrate different religions. And by doing that, they're just trying to create a mind that they actually conform to the diversity issues. Then, ladies and gentlemen, then we have another concept, which is gender sensitization. So gender sensitization is just a development on issues to do with diversity. But you see, there's been a lot of talk about gender. And when it comes to gender, always what comes in our mind is how well are we able to place women in the positions of leadership? How do we make them to appear in the space of managers? Because when you look at some statistics, there are statistics that have shown that globally there's now a tendency where we're now seeing more women taking up leadership positions. And that can be attributed to the sensitization that has been going on. And also the ability of women now to come and prove that they can do it. So at least now we are moving away from that prejudice where people will always associate women and say they just want to be given positions. But now we can see that they're coming out and proving that they can actually do it. So though there's still a lot to be done, because those policies exist, but when it comes to effectiveness or effecting the same, it has been a challenge. And a case in point is our constitution. When did it come into force? We're looking at 2010. 10 years down the line, how has been the gender role been effective? It's a big question, because that gender role has been a debate every now and then, yet it's written in the Constitution, third of either gender. So it's not been achieved, which is a challenge to that. So let's now look at some of the examples of a company in India. So this company, it introduced what we call Women's Inclusivity Network Initiative, where the purpose to support diversity. That means to them, they were looking at how do we empower women? How do we advocate for women inclusivity when it comes to businesses? So that was their aim. So this company, Infosys, introduced that initiative. But however, with the passage of time, the initiative was suitably toned down to meet business needs where the need to encourage diversity was given up to the out of convenience. So that means they were not really committed to it, because you'll see that the top leadership vis-a-vis the other managers and the people, they were speaking in different voices. For example, the senior management of Infosys was committed to diversity and inclusivity, but the situation on the shop floor is something different altogether. So the managers are speaking that, but when it comes to the shop floor at the lower level, we find that people are actually discriminatory. And you can see that there were so many instances of employees showing scant respect for diversity and being exclusive in the dealings with others. This presents problems to the companies concerned, as not only does this attitude vitiate the organizational culture, but it's also detrimental for its reputation and adherence to corporate governance principles. So through this initiative, we can say that though the Infosys received the blessings of the founders and other executives, but the other managers did not see the need to follow these principles. And it could be an aspect of what is spoken at the top level is completely in contrast with what is happening on the ground. That's now the ideal versus the real. So then mindsets are hard to change, and hence diversity is often sacrificed for organizational cohesion. Change those mindsets. Like now you can see the founders are a few, but who are the majority? The people at the shop floor. Now, if the people at the shop floor do not conform to these, then automatically that organization is headed in the wrong direction. Because it would have been better if actually it was the opposite. But if people who are supposed to uphold that are themselves fluttering the same, then it becomes a big challenge to the management of the organization, especially the executives and also the mid-level managers. Now, there's usually that excuse where people will say that, oh, we didn't get enough people from these groups, or people who applied did not meet those needs of different backgrounds, and hence it's not possible to have diversity. Yes and no. So somebody can justify that. But you see, it also boils down to what people have heard about the organization. But you see, if I know very well that this organization, the information, the feedback I've gotten is that they don't uphold diversity, they don't give people equal opportunity, then I will not even be feel like applying for that position. I will not be interested. My interest will automatically be drained, because I will not be seeing any value. I will not be seeing any hope. I will not be seeing any potential of me moving to that organization. But it's now for those ones who uphold that, or for those ones who feel that they have excuses, they will say that, oh, we didn't get people from those backgrounds, and that's why we don't have them on board. But it's important now to have this consideration of the facts, whereby it shows that this is not true given the available labor pool that is very rich in diversity. So I agree with that, because look at how many people are unemployed. There's no way you can say that they didn't apply for the positions, unless you have this organization that has already branded itself and people know that you are not objective, or people know that you are discriminatory, or people know that you don't get people from different backgrounds. So then that calls for what we call value-based management. Value-based management is a concept that promotes diversity and inclusivity as a business principle. So corporate leaders are challenged in this case now to ensure that they have this value-based management. So for them to achieve that, they should ensure that diversity and inclusivity have to be practiced, because it lends credence to value-based management and management that is humanistic in nature. So as much as many organizations will claim to have these diversity programs, but you find that very few women, as this says, that they are in those positions of power for the sake of satisfying the principle of diversity in the letter of the law, rather than the spirit of the law. So many top-notch companies actually, and if you look at that as a case, we find that they have very regressive attitudes that exist to prevent women and other minorities from being significant. In fact, even today, we still have some organizations which they will say the position of the CEO actually has to be held by a man, or there are some specific positions that they insist it must be held by a man. So that's what we are referring to as some of the regressive attitudes that we need to overcome if we are to progress. So, however, this is neither an ideal situation nor the real situation. So what is management's role in this case? So management must identify and acknowledge this by coming up with value-based management, as I've mentioned before, so that they're not just driven by profit, but they're looking at how do we ensure inclusivity for the growth of this business. So by practicing that, then the organization will be able to brand itself as an employer of choice, or it will be branding itself as a brand for which other organizations can benchmark. So the prevailing attitudes must change, and leadership must set an example to the rest of the organization to follow when formulating these policies. And that's the essence of the underlying point behind having to treat people without showing any undue favors and barriers. So, moreover, we need to develop, or we need to have the culture of tolerance and inclusivity, which has to be part of the DNA of the organization. Because as you all know, who changes the organization? One person cannot change an organization. It has to be a collective effort. So we must look at, we collectively, are we able to achieve this? Are we able to promote this concept? Are we able to ensure that everybody upholds to the policy of diversity and inclusivity? So that's one of the things that is very, very crucial to the organization to achieve this in view of the culture of tolerance. So what does this mean? It means to the middle management and even the employees from the ground that they need to be taught to respect diversity and welcome inclusivity. So there's a lot of work that we need to do. There's a lot of sensitization that we need to do in order to make people have that tolerance, people to understand who they are dealing with. Because, and as I've already said, we can never be the same. Organizations will always have diversity. Whether you like it or not, diversity is here. And therefore, we just need to devise ways of maximizing on this diversity. That's the only way we'll be able to stand the test of time. We'll be able to even grow globally. Because today, if you are to start a company in Zambia, then of course you must be diversity conscious. Otherwise, there is no way you can carry the same culture from Kenya and take it to Zambia and hope to prosper. You will not. You won't prosper. So you must look at the different cultures. If you are opening a subsidiary in South Africa, if you're opening a subsidiary in Egypt, then there are some underlying cultures where now tolerance becomes very, very vital. So your adherence to that, your inclusivity is what will give you a competitive edge. Otherwise, you'll not be able to survive as an organization. So the question of fostering this inclusive environment is how to foster this inclusive environment in the current business world is about not tolerating harassment and discrimination. Rather, companies and business leaders must walk the talk and practice what they preach about having inclusive environment at the workplace. It's also important to keep in mind that just having policy in place alone is not enough to prevent harassment. And this is what I've said. I'm sure each one of you have policies. You have that HR, the handbook. But at what point do you think people understand? And do you have somebody to enforce it? Do people know that if I don't adhere to these policies, then I'll be held liable, I'll be held accountable? So you find that once we recruit somebody, we give them the policy now, this is your policy, this is the HR handbook and all that, go through, that is it. We forget about it, that's the end. Then we start focusing on work targets, end of the year, that is it. Then we forget about fostering this environment. So we start now not considering ourselves as an environment that promotes togetherness, but we're now looking at meeting targets. So we do that, thereby sacrificing this at the altar of profit, or just focusing more on profit. Yet, we can actually concurrently ensure that we provide inclusive environment, at the same time focus on profit, because ultimately the business depends on the people. And once you have people with the right mindset, once you have people who are engaged, once you have people who feel valued, once you have people who are dedicated, then ultimately your business will thrive. That's a question that we as a strategic, sometimes when you say that HR playing a strategic role, then these are the things that we need to front. You need to front this kind of ideas. So it's very crucial to sensitize employees towards this diversity, because it must take place, and employees at all levels must be able to be sensitive to the problems of women, racial minorities, and those who are alternative sexual orientation. In many MNCs or the multinationals, you find that they have these explicit training programs that are conducted to sensitize the staff on these issues, and these are practices that other companies can follow to have an inclusive environment. Similarly, redressal mechanism in place where victims can report the incidents in a confidential and secure manner. This means that the identity of the victims is not curtailed or is not damaged, or we don't. If I report that incident, I should not be exposed, but rather be protected so that the enforcement of the same policy can be done. Then thirdly, we expect that we have this punishment that must be meted out in case of wrongdoing, especially in organizations, so that we need to, instead of just reprimanding the perpetrator and allowing the person to get away with the misdemeanor, there needs to be concrete action so that such incidents are not allowed to recur again. So let it be a lesson. The way we usually say, this will serve as a lesson. So once you are able to enforce that, people will start now to acknowledge that this is something that the organization does not tolerate. This is something that management does not tolerate. So we must ensure that we work as a team, we respect each other, and we appreciate our differences. That way is the only way the organizations can be able to move forward. Otherwise, if we don't have those punitive actions against perpetrators, then it will be repeating, or we actually be encouraging the same acts. So companies are therefore supposed to initiate possible strict actions that will actually deter others as they serve as examples. Then the fourth aspect of, which is the final one, on fostering an inclusive environment, is effect a change in the mindset that creates inclusivity rather than narrow-mindedness. Therefore, it will be in the interest of the business leaders if they inculcated some of these values like tolerance, respect, diversity among the staff. Because once we achieve this change in the attitude, then there'll definitely be an inclusive work environment. So then this brings me to this question, that did you know that the corporate world has now accepted lesbian gay, bisexual, and transgender people in the workplace, increasing overall workplace diversity. However, a research conducted found that 23% of gay employees have been harassed at work, 12% have been denied promotions, and 9% were fired because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. That's just for your thought. It's just a matter of the global research that was done. So it doesn't have to do anything with my thoughts. I just quoted what the research revealed in view of issues to do with diversity. Then that then brings us to the aspect of cultures, because we said cultures are at the center of whether we'll be able to appreciate other people, whether we're going to provide equal opportunities, and whether we are able now to manage diversity. And that's where, in this introduction, we talk about how many other, we have many studies that have dealt with culture and how it affects the workplace. So there are different schools of thought that have tried to define culture. And we can have these three approaches. One school of thought of understanding culture is using the 6 questions approach. The other one is using the 4 dimensions. And the last one is using the Hofstede model. So Hofstede model, as we look at it, you find that it's a commonly used one, especially for multinationals. But these other ones are used at our own level. How do we understand each one of us? So for example, the 6 questions approach was developed by Florence Kluckhorn in 1961. And they had these questions that you ask yourself, what do members of society assume about other people? That is, are other people good, bad, or a combination? That's the question that you ask yourself now in understanding the culture. Secondly, what do members of our society assume about the relationship between one person and nature? That is, do they believe in establishing harmonious relationships with nature, or are they willing to turn nature into their advantage? That's another question that we need to ask yourself in understanding cultures. How are planned and accomplished in society? Is the status of space to private space? Then another question that we may look at is, what is the dominant temporal orientation? What is the dominant temporal orientation for the future when it comes to this? So these are the questions that, according to these are the 6 questions that you need to ask yourself in the effort to understand the culture issues. Then next, the 4 dimensions. So the 4 dimensions was developed by Edward Hall. And according to him, the sort of question that we need to ask ourselves in a bid to understand culture is the amount of information that needs to be transferred if a message is to be stated. So you look at it from that perspective. 2, the concept of space, which is similar to what Luke Holm was talking about. Then also the importance assigned to time schedules, or time and schedules. Then of course, you look at the speed in which organizations are able now to make decisions or to actually deal with the issues surrounding the environment. Then as we come to a conclusion, then we look at Hofstede. Now Hofstede, I think most of us have come across Hofstede's model, because it's a model that we use to understand cultures globally. And in it, in fact, you can understand why, if you have a white person leading the organization, and if it's a white person from UK, then there are certain predispositions that they will exhibit in that organization when it comes to leadership. There are things that they'll be very keen on compared to if you have the organization being led by another person from Asia or China or India. So that diversity in terms of leadership is also what, according to Girt, the hosted, he was trying to explain the concept vis-a-vis the different multinationals and even the different countries, and say that it's important that we acknowledge that we can understand or we can classify cultures on 5 typologies or dimensions. So according to these dimensions, that we're able to understand our organization, whether it falls under that aspect of power distance, or it could be masculinity versus femininity. It could be individualism versus collectivism, long-term orientation versus short-term thinking, or our culture is uncertainty avoidance. In fact, if you look at these, Hosted tries to dissect most of the issues at leadership level and management level into these aspects, whereby you can be able to understand the organization and say, I think our organization is more, it has a culture that is more inclined towards power distance, meaning we are so hierarchical in our policies, we are so hierarchical in our decisions. And therefore, we tend to respect a lot of power, where we say it has to go through this office, it has to go through that, it has to go through this decision has to be ratified by so and so. That way, then we are conforming to the power distance. Maybe to look at each one of them briefly. Power distance measures the hierarchy, to which hierarchy dominates the work environment. For example, the US, the power distance is relatively small compared to China, where the power distance is more because of the hierarchical nature of the Chinese society. Now, these, if we look at it now at the local level, then you need to ask yourself in your organization, is the organization hierarchical? If it is, then it's inclined towards this power distance, whereby it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort for a decision to be taken. Then we have masculinity versus femininity. Now, masculinity versus femininity is basically a setup whereby organizations tend to value certain, or as I said, some positions where you say this one has to be male dominated, this has to be female dominated. So those traits tend to affect also the manner in which organizations are run. For example, on this one, we can see that the organization will be able to tell whether this organization has more of male or has less of female. And does that affect how we interact with the female? If the female are less compared to the male, how does that portend to the organization? How does it affect the aspect of respect? How does it affect the aspect of gender balance in the organization? Then we have individualism versus collectivism. Now, this is where we ask ourselves, if I look at my organization, is it individually centered or is it collectivism centered? By individuals, I mean, people are just working towards them achieving their targets as themselves, as James, for example. But when it comes to collectivism, then we are looking at, do we take collective responsibility? If a mistake has been done, will I point at James or will I say, we acknowledge this problem, we need to work towards achieving it. We need to work towards minimizing it. We need to work towards solving it. Or are we that organization that will always point fingers and say, so and so, this was done by so and so? A client complains about lack of feedback. Then the first thing you don't acknowledge and say it is, we acknowledge this, but you start pointing fingers and saying so and so did not do that. So we are looking at whether we are promoting a culture of teamwork or individualism. So that's also another way in which Hofstede was trying to guide us in understanding these cultures that we exist in. Then on long-term orientation versus short-term thinking, this is basically where we are looking at Are we focused on long-term achievement or the short-term things? Are we an organization that is looking at the short term? Do we focus more on these long-term issues at the expense of, short-term issues at the expense of long-term issues, or we are more focused at the future than the short term? Sometimes there are some organizations whereby you remind people about the future. There are others, you're being reminded about what you are supposed to do, what you didn't do yesterday. So then the question will be, where are you focusing on? Are you more on short term? Are you more on long term? So that's the question that you need to ask yourself. Do you regard your organization as short term thinking or long term orientation? Because that's basically or definitely where we belong within our organizations. We are either short term or long term. Then uncertainty avoidance. This is basically a culture whereby we avoid change. That's basically uncertainty. Organizations that avoid change. Every time we ask ourselves, we are not prepared. We're not ready for this. Why don't we think about it in the next financial year? We're not already about, we don't have the right mindset. We don't have the right skills. That's where we talk about uncertainty avoidance. So usually these organizations or these countries tend to lag behind because they are not risk takers. Every time they're just looking at, we should not do this because it will challenge our status. We are not going to embrace the new policies because it's going to affect the manner in which we interact and all that. That's uncertainty avoidance. So look at your company. If even when COVID-19 hit us hard, to what extent have you adopted work from home policy? If you're that organization that still holds on people going physically to work, and you've never had a conversation around working from home, then just know that you belong to this culture of uncertainty avoidance. And such like organizations are those ones that are not ready to learn, they're not willing to learn, and therefore such organizations are very difficult to embrace the pace of change that is happening in the world. So generally then Hofstede's model will be important because it enables us to understand the different cultures and also to learn. It can also help managers who work in different cultures to understand the differences, and also people can be trained on how to deal with them. Take an example of China and India. When are you able to know the status of the employee matters a lot, given the fact that in the West, these are important, but not the extent to which they are in the East. So as an expatriate, it will be very key to understand how these work and how they will affect you in the course of work. So finally, the ideal situation for expatriate managers to adjust to the local cultures is to adopt a global approach. This will be helpful as it combines global outlook with local approach. Therefore, multinationals can adapt themselves to the local cultures and at the same time do not lose focus on their global vision. This is how important this model will be and other models in providing information about cultural understanding. So this is a question I will have asked, so that which of the following dimensions of Hofstede model measure the extent to which hierarchy dominates the work environment? Which of those dimensions? We looked at 5 of them. I've listed 4. So which one do you think talks about the extent to which hierarchy dominates work environment? Maybe I can just take a poll. What do you think? Is it masculinity? Is it power distance? Is it uncertainty avoidance? Is it individualism versus collectivism?
I think power distance.
Power distance. Okay, then yes, Dr. says about power distance. That's from Agesa. Thank you. Anybody else? Which one dominates the work environment? Power distance, that's from Sabrina. Power distance from Josephine. Power distance, power distance. I think we are in agreement that actually it's power distance that dominates, or where hierarchy dominates the work environment. I think the same from Anne. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Josephine. Thank you, Sabrina. So power distance is basically that hierarchy, as I mentioned, that tends to dominate most of our workplace. And you know, the hierarchy that we create, sometimes it's not about, you know, we have a hierarchy, but the speed within which the decisions are taken is reduced. But then we have also other hierarchies whereby even it could be just a decision that requires a short time, but it takes a lot of time. Then we can be looking at that power distance as being to negate, or it tends to negate the activities of the organization. Good. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me. That has been the first module of diversity management. Is there any, do we have any questions, comments around that? Any questions, any comments around diversity?
My question, Sabrina here.
Yes.
On diversity management and interviews, whereby
Yes.
we are always encouraged to actually, is it when you're advertising, we encourage diversity. So when people apply, during short listings, you know, we have what do we have? We have qualifications.
Yes.
So let's say people with disability, they
Yes.
apply and actually compete with the rest.
Yes.
Then you find out that they do not qualify. So in your
Yes.
final report, you actually do not include them in the final report because of the qualification again. In such instances, is it a must that you have to include them, or it is okay to kick them out as per qualification? Because it's yeah.
Or whether it's important to have that as part of your report, or you have it generally as a report of people who didn't qualify.
What I mean,
yes.
What I mean in
yes.
in the final report, like what we would do is we'll give a reason why they did not qualify.
Yes.
But my question is it a must to include them in the final list of people who have qualified, even if they do not qualify, just to meet the diversity?
Now, in fact, that's the challenge. Remember I said there are some organizations or some policies which make people just to include them in the final list for the sake of meeting that diversity aspect, but it's actually not right. What needs to be done is you need to focus more on the qualifications, because that's what you use to inform. But of course, in your list, you'll have people with those, you'll have actually at least a report showing that the people that applied were like 110. These were the gender, disabilities, and all that. But your main focus in this case is not about meeting a gender or a diversity threshold, but you are looking at what? The job, people with the competencies that meet the requirements of the job. So I agree, you don't have to include that because you just want to appear like you've actually met that requirement. And that's the question that you've seen even the politicians grappling with. Because the question has been, you want to just include these positions because you want to fulfill the requirement, or you're looking at the capability of the person. So I think it's very important that we actually give an objective report as per the job requirement. But of course, in the applicants will have indicated, but now when it comes to the next level, we're now looking at the specifics of the job and the person, then that's when now the report should dwell more on. I hope I've answered your question, Sabrina.
Yes, another question.
Yes.
Still on the same line.
Yes.
For example, during shortlisting, I know for us, we're in the public sector, so they would come up with a committee to do shortlisting. So we do the shortlisting, we give the final report. But when it goes to the top management, you'll find that some positions are highly competitive, like number 1 to 10 or number 1 to, let's say, 12 takes up people of a certain community. So when take it to like top management, for them it's like they have the power. Like if top 10 has people from maybe Western and Nyanza, so they will check the person who is they'll actually, because of their rights or authority, they'll check somebody who is number 20, maybe from Central, and include in the top 5, or just to make it balanced. Is that proper?
No, it's not proper. It's not proper. And that's why we said we need also to have that buy-in from the top leadership to understand that we need to run a process that is transparent. Because now that's where people will start raising questions, because somebody will say, this person did not perform. And you see that information will be in the public domain, and they'll say, this person was number 8, or this person was number 20. So it's not good now to just include them because you want to meet those requirements. But of course, that will require that change the mindset at the top level. So that also they're the ones that actually should inform the guidelines on how this process should be done at the middle and also at the functional level. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Patrick, I think Patrick says, yeah, Dr. says that question from Sabrina is prevalent in public service. Yes. Patrick says, I find the sexual orientation diversity issue to be still a challenge, possibly because of our gender, societal, cultural orientation. What are your thoughts? Patrick, yes. That one, you know, now this is where we talk about like sexual orientation is a very emotive issue in Kenya and also around the globe. You've seen countries like US, they have embraced that sexual orientation. But when it comes to Kenya, also our cultural orientation, societal cultural orientation does not allow us to uphold that. So it's still, we are looking at that, you know, that acceptability. We still need people to be sensitized to accept it because it's still something that is very strange. And if today you come publicly and say that I'm gay, in fact, we'll automatically look at you differently because the society has not accepted that. The same applies to, depending on now where we will be. Like I said, if you are a multinational company and you have a subsidiary in US, you'll comfortably talk about those issues in US than if it is in a Kenyan context. So I agree, it's still a challenge because of our societal, cultural orientation that we are in. It does not allow us to comfortably or to confidently debate about this kind of emotive matters. All right. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your patience. Despite some of the challenges that we faced on and off the presentation, but I'm glad that you've been very attentive and your input has been very, very vital. So I want to end there and invite you again for the second module tomorrow, which will be facilitated by, I think, Catherine. Catherine will be facilitating that tomorrow, or is it Jocelyn? I think one of us, as per the calendar for the training program. Then let us meet again on that tomorrow, same time, with the next facilitator to take you through the second module. Then by the end of the third module, then we'll have a lot of anchorage when it comes to diversity issues and management and how to deal with people to make it, to make this a better society to live in. So thank you very much and have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.